But to that person, when you walk into that room, it is the first time they are seeing you and telling their story. So it's not just another patient with eczema. It is an individual who has their own story to tell. So if you approach it that way, you're always going to come in with fresh eyes because they have different fears, they have different concerns, they have different questions.
Hi, skin friend. Thanks so much for tuning into this week's episode of The Skin Reel. This week, I'm so excited to have a triple board certified pediatrician, dermatologist, as well as pediatric dermatologist, Dr. Meena Julapalli, joining me today. She is such a cool woman. She is doing so many cool things. She has her own direct pay pediatric dermatology practice in Houston, Texas, called Bluebird Dermatology. But she's also very involved in medical humanitarian missions throughout the world and here in the US. And she's going to share some of her experiences treating children with severe medical as well as skin conditions, not only here in the US, but also around the world, and how a lot of times our medicines can only do so much. And a lot of these conditions that we see, especially in children or these genetic conditions, there isn't a cure. But she wants families and parents and her patients to know that there's still hope. There's always hope. And there's always an ability to find joy and meaning and to realize that actually these severe skin conditions can become your superpower. This episode was truly inspirational for me. If you are struggling with a severe skin condition, no matter how old you are or know someone who is, you are not going to want to miss this episode. Dr. Julapalli, I'm so excited to have you on. You are doing so many cool things that I cannot wait to have you share with everyone here. And of course, I always love to talk to another Dr. Mina. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to speak with your audience and you.
I introduced you briefly in the intro, but I would love for the audience to hear in your own words who you are, what you do, and kind of what you're passionate about.
So I am triple board certified in pediatrics, dermatology, and pediatric dermatology. And I worked in academics for about 7 years before kind of becoming burned out by just I had seen almost 50 patients a day and not feeling like I had the time and the freedom to care for my patients in the best possible way I knew how. And so I took a little bit of a break and then I decided to open up my own direct care practice where there's no middlemen. It's just me and the family and the patient. I found it rewarding and challenging in the most wonderful ways, and it has actually inspired the work that I do with my patients in that kind of setting has inspired a lot of the volunteer mission work that I have done. And then I became a children's book author inspired by my experiences with my patients. And then I started a new organization called The Joyful Path, which helps people, especially children, discover the joy of their unique gifts through offerings that help them build the intuition of how to nourish their mind, their body, their heart, their spirit, so that they can live, love, and serve in the world with an open heart, intention, and purpose, and getting to serve and use my gifts.
Wow, I love that. I'm definitely checking out that book for my kids because I think sometimes we think, oh, they'll figure it out later. They're too young for that now. But really, childhood is where it needs to start. So I think that's amazing. I love that you're triple board certified. And gosh, pediatric dermatologists, they are hard to come by. So your patients, your community is lucky to have you. And I love that you're doing direct pay. I think it just brings medicine back to what it used to be, what it should be between a patient and a doctor. It's more rewarding for everyone. And there's transparency with what you're getting, right? And it's just gone bananas with insurance. So I totally see the appeal there. And I think with time, people will start to realize, wait a minute, there's so much value in that. So I think that's super cool and awesome. I have never had anyone on talk about, I mean, we're in the US, so I tend to talk about dermatology in the US. Most of my guests practice in the US. So I think this is a great opportunity for you to share some of your humanitarian work because skincare is not just in the US. And I know I have listeners all over the world. So I'd love to hear about what you're doing, especially in regards to skin health.
When I was a pediatric resident, I had the opportunity to spend a month working at the Baylor College of Medicine Pediatric HIV/AIDS Clinic in Lesotho in Africa. And it was an experience where my eyes and my heart just burst wide open to a much broader perspective on what is possible for help and healing, even in resource limited settings. You learn to think outside the box. You learn to develop your creativity and innovation in how you take care of patients. You stretch out of your comfort zone for sure. It's an experience that allows you to have gratitude and not take things for granted. I mean, these are kids who are severely immunocompromised. So you saw the worst case of chickenpox, the worst case of a lot of different kinds of infectious diseases that manifest in the skin, tuberculosis, nutritional deficiencies, things that we only learn in textbooks, but you're seeing it all the time. You saw both the similarities and kind of the differences in different healthcare systems, but I will still say fundamentally, what we focused so much on was nutrition, because there was not going to be any wound healing or overcoming infection without simultaneously focusing on the full picture, focusing on nutrition. And without adequate nutrition, they didn't do well. And this was before, protein bars became such a big thing, but they used to have this supplement called Plumpy Nut. It was this kind of gooey peanut butter loaded with good fats and protein. And it was magical for the recovery. I would see them 2 weeks later and they had gained weight and they were responding to the treatment. And so it just kind of reinforced how important nutrition was as part of the recovery process. And I mean, it's something that I even take into how I take care of patients here on this side of the world. I often tell my kids, or I call my kids because they're my kids, they're my patients, they're my kids, that in order to take care of what's on the outside, it's really important to take care of what's on the inside, how we think, how we feel, what we put in our bellies, how we move our bodies. Because if you take care of what's on the inside, it's easier to take care of what's on the outside and the energy that you project out into the world. And so there were so many, being in lots of different settings teaches you things that you can come back and add to your toolbox in how you serve and care for patients all over the world.
I'm sure that was so eye-opening because those are things we, like you said, we just read about, right? These nutritional deficiencies. We just don't see that in the US. We've got our own issues for sure, right? But yeah, to see kids like that, right? Like that, I'm sure can be really gut-wrenching too. And to not have the resources that we have here, but yet to still know that you can still do so much good. And to your point, like nutrition, getting protein, getting calories, a more balanced diet, like how much that improves your health, your skin, wound healing, which I think here sometimes we think of skincare, skin health as like just putting on topical things, right? But really, I like to say skincare is whole body care because you have to take care of your body first for your skin to reflect health.
Since then, I have gone to Nicaragua. I worked with children with albinism in Tanzania because that's the world's largest population of albinism is in Tanzania. I got to do a medical mission in Thailand. And the thing is, like, they might be completely different continents, but there's a lot of things that are similar and different in the resources that are available, but similar in that skin conditions everywhere affect people's self-esteem, affect you physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, socially. And so these are things that are universal, that are important to think about when you are treating the skin. There's nothing that's just a skin condition. It's everything.
Oh gosh, right? That's why I have a friend who's a neurosurgeon and I'll joke with him. He'll say like you fix someone's like brain or back and they're thankful and all, but you fix something that's visible, they can see, they love you forever because it is so much more than just vanity. It really affects psychosocially. I mean, some people are outcast in their communities because their skin looks different. I mean, think about lepers, right? I mean, they were total outcasts for millennium. And that's a disease that manifests very visibly in the skin. And so people think you're contagious or have infections or that they're going to catch it from you. And sometimes you can, right? But yeah, I think that's why sometimes we just focus on skin as aesthetics, right? Anti-aging, but really skin is so much more than that.
So albinism in Tanzania, I mean, this is going to sound like this is decades ago, but this is happening currently right now.
Dr. Julapalli, can you just first say what is albinism?
So albinism, it's a genetic skin condition that affects pigment wherever you have pigment. So like pigment in your skin, pigment in your eyes, it can affect your vision. Because you don't have pigment in your skin, you're more at risk for skin cancers. So when you go on medical missions, you might be there for a week, maybe a month, maybe a little bit longer. We're packed seeing as many people as we possibly can in that period of time. But in many ways, you don't feel like you're doing a whole lot if you're not leaving them with a way to help take care of themselves. So a lot of what we did was education. And albinism is one of those conditions. So I think about 1 in 2,000 people are affected by that condition in Tanzania. And there's such a lack of education in what it is. I mean, there are people who think that when you don't have color in your skin, you have no soul, or that what they have is contagious. There are witch doctors who actually kidnap, this sounds terrible, and it is, but they kidnap children with albinism and mutilate their body parts, and they're sold as good luck. And so there was a huge initiative in Tanzania to have orphanages that would at least keep them safe. Now, the downside to that is it kept them separated. So they still weren't integrated into society. And when they were 18, they had to leave the orphanages. And because they didn't really know how to live in a world that doesn't really understand them, they struggled after that too. So they were kept physically safe, but not emotionally, mentally, socially safe afterwards. And so a lot of what we did was education, just about what it even is, how to protect your skin. I mean, if you have people on this side of the world with albinism, they could live their whole lives with clear skin without ever having any issues with skin cancer or anything, because they know how to take care of their skin. They were given sunscreen, by the government, but they thought it was just a moisturizer or cream. They didn't understand what it was for and how it might protect them. So a lot of what we did was education, because ultimately when you, in any service, even the way that I practice medicine now, is one of my roles is to empower them with the knowledge and the tools to help themselves and to be able to advocate for themselves. This is anywhere that I went, but I want to bring this up because I think it's just a reminder of the power of all the different ways that we can heal our patients, and not just, I think on this side of the world, we always focus so much on fixing disease, and we're really good at it, but we don't talk a lot about maintenance and prevention, and how healing encompasses so much more than that. Sometimes there isn't a cure for certain things, especially these genetics and conditions, but that doesn't mean that you just have to live in survival mode all the time. There are ways that you can still live and thrive. And I carry this in my heart. When I was on that mission in Lesotho in Africa, every morning before we started clinic, where we stayed was just right next door. So we would just roll out of bed and then go to the clinic. But most of these caregivers had been walking for miles and miles and miles before the crack of dawn to be at the clinic at the start of opening, because we would see them in the order that they came. And as a blessing for this sacred space that we were creating, before we started clinic, everybody would join in a prayer to kind of bless the day. And none of these people knew each other. And yet they all sang in perfect harmony. And it would make my heart burst with joy. I mean, I was literally weeping every morning, because no matter who these strangers were in these walks of life, we came together in this safe, sacred space to trust each other, to build a relationship, to help each other, because a lot of the caregivers were grandparents, because the parents of these children had died of AIDS. So these were generations coming together, and they were so gracious for any love and care that we could provide. It's something that even in a setting like we have, when sometimes you feel like there's a lot of demands and a lot of I want a quick fix kind of stuff, I go back to that moment to remind myself that people are struggling. They're coming from different spaces where it might seem like they're demanding something of you. Really, they just want hope.
Someone to help, someone to offer support or kindness, right? Maybe they've been with a child who looks different or has a condition that's within their community not accepted. It's such a different world from anything anyone in these Western cultures. It's hard to even imagine that that's life for people in this world today. Really just amazing.
I had friends with me who were also on the medical mission, and my parents are Indian, so we would go to India when I was a kid to visit. And so I have been witness to extreme poverty. But for some of the people who came on the mission with us, I mean, this was completely out of their just awareness. And they would see kids just playing on the street with a broken tire or something like that, or just struggling to find clean water to drink. And it would make them feel really sad. But you looked at these kids, they're laughing, they're playing. That's all they know. At some point, I was like, they have complete gratitude for what they have. They're making the most of what they have. They don't know any different. This is their world. And so, I take it as a lesson that when you go back to your word and you have all these luxuries, that may not be how other people live on other sides of the world, but you can still have gratitude for what you have and also what you can offer, but also not to see a different side of the world, how people live differently and look down upon them, because with their resources, they are living and thriving as well. It may seem different for you because it's a different experience, but all the more reason why healing is not just about fixing or curing or living luxurious lives. It just means what are ways that we can live and thrive with the time and the energy and the resources and the environment that we have.
And it kind of shows like money and certain like luxury things that we sometimes feel are necessary or we're owed or we deserve, right? Like that doesn't necessarily bring happiness to people. In fact, it usually doesn't. So, a great reminder with that. And I think nowadays the world can feel really small because of the internet. We say, oh, just Google this or just search on that. But that's not always an option for everyone. And so, having doctors come in and provide that education is really powerful, not just for the patients, but for the families too. And I'm sure you do that a lot in your clinic here in the US, right? Because I know I do this all the time too. Like I'm educating my patients on skin cancer or skin cancer prevention and how best to take care of their bodies. And I've really gotten interested in not just treating disease or curing it, or cutting it out, but how do we actually prevent it in the first place? And so I'm sure you're doing a lot of that sort of education with your patients and families here.
My sort of practice philosophy is educate, empower, advocate. And by education, I don't just mean me telling them what to do. It's me actually educating myself about their story, listening to their story, where they've been. I can't help them get to where they want to go if I don't know where they've been. And what are their barriers to care? Is it knowledge? Is it resources? Is it environment? Is it their support system? And how can I help them overcome those barriers? So when I have taken the time to learn their story and their experience. When I used to have work in an academic center and I used to have residents and students, when you're seeing 40, 50 patients a day, you might have 20 patients who have eczema, 10 patients have acne, 10 patients who come in with warts or whatever it is, right? But to that person, when you walk into that room, it is the first time they are seeing you and telling their story. So it's not just another patient with eczema. It is an individual who has their own story to tell. So if you approach it that way, you're always going to come in with fresh eyes because they have different fears, they have different concerns, they have different questions. And when you do that, then you're not just going into this kind of just press and play on the
Here goes my eczema speech.
exactly. You're present with them. And then so when I've kind of heard their story, then I can help kind of fill in the gaps with my knowledge. And together, once we've created that sacred relationship of trust, then I can come up with an individual plan that works for them, that empowers them with the knowledge and tools that they can use to help heal themselves. And then once they've done that, then they now know how to advocate for themselves. And because we're inherently compassionate human beings, we begin to advocate for others. And that to me is what the true healing cycle becomes because at that point, they don't need me anymore.
There are not a ton of pediatric dermatologists out there, and there are some really severe skin conditions that children have to deal with.
There's only 400 pediatric dermatologists in the whole country. So we're a pretty rare breed. So when people come to see me, they're honestly, they're not just looking for guidance. They're looking for hope. So much of what they've been told, especially for some of these families who have rare genetic skin conditions, who are looking for just hope, because hope is sort of, it plants the seed of possibility that life could be different, life could be better, more peaceful, less painful, whatever that is. With that hope and possibility comes wholeness and healing, whatever that may be. Because again, it might not be a cure, but that doesn't mean that you can't be healed. And then with that healing comes a joy. I have spent the last years going around the country speaking a lot about cultivating joy in life and work. And one of the things that I talk about is that joy is not the absence of sadness. It's what allows us to experience all of what makes us human. I kind of think of it like a swing. At that moment where time stands still, you have to commit to powering through the depths of despair, anxiety, grief to reach new heights of joy. All of those experiences that we have, there's something that we can learn and grow from them. And that comes with having a chronic illness. There's one study that actually showed that having a chronic, so they measured impairment in quality of life in children with chronic illnesses, and chronic skin disease was second only to cerebral palsy, in front of chronic kidney disease, in front of cystic fibrosis, in front of diabetes. I mean, some of these very debilitating chronic illnesses, because it does affect every aspect of your life. And so I do feel like one of my big roles is to be able to give patients and their families hope. I was reflecting the other day about how much I dislike the phrase, "Don't get your hopes up," because
You're like the opposite. You're like, do get your hopes up.
yeah, because it's like when people say, "Oh, false hope," and what does that even mean? That's an oxymoron. How do you know something's false before it's even happened? Hope is the belief in the possibility that something could happen, and this is also why I encourage people to share their stories, because when they share their stories and someone else hears that story of transformation, they now have a seed of possibility that transformation can happen for themselves. I feel very limited in all the different ways that I can help heal my patients in a clinic setting, because for the most part, we're focusing on their physical health and just how to survive. But it's outside the clinic setting and all the other things that I help them with that helps them to live and thrive because of the challenges that they face.
I fully believe that because I remember I don't see many children now, but when I was in training, severe eczema, right? Their skin is thickened, what we call lichenified. They can't sleep. Then they can't do well in school. They're miserable. Or I did a trip in Australia when I was a medical student working with kids with epidermolysis bullosa, where they have a condition where their skin breaks apart and it heals with scarring. And then they no longer have hands with 5 fingers. Their hands become sort of stumps. They're still kids. They want to have fun. They want to experience camp and a normal life, right? And at least at the time, there was no cure for epidermolysis bullosa. I think there are some like good treatments now, but there really was nothing more than wound care that we could do. So it was so important to do all these other things you're talking about, mindset and having hope and finding joy, right? Despite the hardship. So you said that beautifully. So I love that.
Well, you mentioned camp, which I want to put a huge plug in for, because I often say that camp is one of the most powerful medicines that I can prescribe, because when you go to camp, these kids aren't patients. They're kids who just want to be kids, who are just trying to survive in a world that doesn't always accept or understand or even welcome them. But when you go to camp, they may start the week as shy, quiet, and sure of who they are. And then they kind of stretch out of their comfort zone. They try new things, they make new friends, they discover their big personalities, their individuality, their confidence, their creativity. They make new friends, and then they empower themselves with the knowledge that they're not alone. That is probably the single most empowering, healing thing that they could ever experience. So American Academy of Dermatology has a camp program, and I've been going for the last 20 years, and I'm part of the medical director team for the one in Texas. And it was so life-changing for me that I became involved with more camps when I moved to Colorado. I started a family camp there in Colorado. So you mentioned epidermolysis bullosa, that we have a winter camp for kids with EB. It's at the National Sports Center for the Disabled at Winter Park, Colorado, where they have so much of life. These kids are always told, no, you can't do this, no, you can't do that. In that camp, it's more about, well, how can you do it? And trying to figure it out, right? And so these kids, they ski, they dog sled, they snowmobile, because they have this adaptive technology that kind of helps their skin not slough off as easily. They come to camp, they zip line, they do archery. We find ways, they canoe, they kayak, they do all of these things because we find a way to do it that allows them to be safe. We talked about, what do people need? They need a sense of safety. A lot of times as caregivers in this day and age, we try to keep our kids in just such protective bubbles that where they don't experience any kind of discomfort at all. But it's almost a disservice for them. Our job as caregivers is to keep them as safe as possible, but it's through discomfort that you discover your strength. It's through boredom that you discover your creativity. And so if you can maintain a safe setting where they know that they are loved and cared for, allow them to be curious, allow them to explore what they can do, and then they no longer feel defined or limited by those challenges. And so camp is such a beautiful way for them to experience that. And because it was so empowering, I became part of the national board of directors for the American Camp Association, so I feel very strongly about it, and I'm still very much involved. But camp might be a week in the summer or a weekend for, like, if it's a family camp, and they learn these incredible tools and they go back a different person. But what I wanted to be able to create was more of those kinds of settings and reinforcements throughout the year, so that if they get that kind of positive reinforcement of what they're capable of, who they can be, how limitless they can be, and who they want to be and what they can accomplish, then it becomes their new default state of being, their new normal. A lot of what I learned from being in camp settings is also what I'm starting to do more and more of with workshops, healing circles, and the organization I was talking about at the beginning called the Dorsal Pat. So a lot of that is how are ways that we can uplift each other. So much of it, I think the problems in the world, not just with skin conditions, but in health in general, is that we are so disconnected from ourselves and the world around us. And I think that's what's creates so many problems. And so a lot of what I'm trying to create are more opportunities for us to connect with ourselves, with nature, with food, with art, with music, with community, because there's so much healing that goes on with that as well.
It's interesting you said we're so disconnected because, right, wasn't the internet and, these little phones, like, isn't that supposed to, connect us, right? And in some ways, there is a little of that, right? But I think, yeah, studies show like people are more lonely than ever, more isolated than ever. You could potentially work from home and never leave your house or apartment, never see another person. And kids, right, during COVID and everything, that was a whole nother challenge for children. I think the camp idea is just amazing. It gives kids a sense of independence. They can see people like themselves.
Representation. Yeah.
It's so important, right? Like Wicked just came out and they were saying this is the first time someone in a wheelchair who's truly uses a wheelchair has played Nessa Rose. And that director felt it important to have someone who really uses a wheelchair in this role. So my camp that I went to with the kids with EB, it was skiing. And at first I remember thinking like, I don't know if this is a good idea. I don't know if they should be doing that. And I think that's what these kids hear a lot is no, you can't do that. No, don't do that. That's not safe, whether they have severe skin conditions or not. So to have the opportunity to do that is really amazing.
When I have students who ask me, they come and ask me, how can I develop my interest in pediatric dermatology? I tell them to do two things. Go to our pediatric dermatology meeting so you get to meet the colleagues that will become your family, and go to camp so that you can actually witness how these kids live their every day. I mean, that is far better education than you'll ever get in a textbook.
For sure. And how do kids go to the camp? Is this something that's supported through donations or people pay? How do you do that?
Yeah, so it's completely free to the campers. It's actually completely free to the volunteers too. So anybody who wants to volunteer are welcome to apply. We usually take counselors who are kind of college age and above. You don't have to have a medical background. We have medical staff who apply. We also have counselors who apply. It's not just magical for these kids. It's magical for people who get to witness what happens there, the transformations that happen there. It transforms you and your view of the world and how you live, love, and serve in the world. And so usually it's your dermatologist who recommends you. But I mean, if it's something that maybe your dermatologist hasn't brought it up and you hear about it maybe from listening to this podcast, ask your dermatologist about it. There are plenty of spots open every year and it's completely free. There are, I want to say 1, 2, 3, 4. I think there's 5 camps all over the country. There's one in Texas. There will be one in California next year. There are 2 in Minnesota divided by age, the younger kids and the teens. And there's one in Pennsylvania and Massachusetts, I think, or Connecticut. It's one of those.
It's called Camp Discovery, right?
It's called Camp Discovery. So it's www.campdiscovery.org.
I need to go and check it out because I think that it's so amazing. And I love that you're doing that work and giving of your time so much is really phenomenal. This has been a lot of fun. I've learned a ton. Pediatric dermatology, I mean, it's such an amazing field. I think helping children is so rewarding. What they go through, their resiliency and their positive attitude. My kids are now 10 and 11, right? And it's like, I wish I could just like keep their innocence and their joyful spirits intact for as long as possible. I feel like that kind of gets beaten out of us as we get older. But what would you say are your top 3 takeaways for a parent who has a child struggling with a severe skin condition?
I would say one, like we talked about earlier, don't give up hope. And again, it may not always be a cure, but there's so many different ways to heal. I share this story a lot, but I'm going to share it with your audience as well, because I think hearing this story gives people so much hope that that possibility is there for themselves too. But I had just gotten back from a meditation retreat where I had probably meditated for about 40 to 50 hours. So I was high on life. I was seeking love and light everywhere. And the very first patient that I saw when I got back to my clinic was a 6-year-old with eczema. And she had been struggling a lot, kind of ups and downs, but this was particularly a down moment because as soon as I walked in the room, the energy of the room completely shifted to one of hopelessness, defeat, frustration. She and mom weren't sleeping at all at night because she was itching all night long. She had eczema from head to toe. She called herself a red monster. She was being bullied at school. And I just needed them to experience a little of the energy of what I had just experienced. So I made it up. We literally got in a circle. I had them hold my hand. I'm trained in heart math technique. And so I just had them breathe into and out of their heart a little bit more slowly and deeply than usual. And then when I could feel that the energy had settled down a little bit, I then had her start to breathe in love into her heart, breathe out fear, breathe in light into her heart, breathe out doubt, breathe in life into her heart, breathe out limitations. And then I had her send that love and that light and that life to her skin. Because so much of life, we're always thinking, why am I not healing? Why am I not getting better? Why is this not working? Instead of what can I do to be in the best state of being to already feel and be healed now. And then I had her send that love and light and life to her mom for taking care of her, because there was so much mom guilt that she wasn't doing enough to take care of her child, that she was failing her child. And then I had them both send that love and that light and life to all the people out there who are affected by eczema, because when you focus on the pain and suffering of others, it lessens your own. And then I checked back in, and the energy had settled down. Mom was crying happy tears. She had a big smile on her face. She gave me a big hug, but that wasn't the best part. A week later, mom sends me a message saying, hey, she's doing that exercise that you taught her every night before she goes to bed. She's inviting me to invite kindness to my heart for taking care of her. She became so empowered, she decided to write a story about her eczema, how it makes her feel, what she has to do to take care of her skin. She shared it with her class. Her teacher was so moved, she asked her to share it with her school. And now that 6-year-old girl used to be bullied, walks the halls with confidence. She's admired for her courage and bravery. Oh, and guess what? Her eczema is better. I didn't do that. The medicines didn't do that. They helped, certainly, but she did that, and she knows she did that by empowering herself with the knowledge that she's not defined or limited by her challenges. And mom was a high school teacher, and they invited me to the high school production of Beauty and the Beast because my 6-year-old patient had a cameo appearance as the pepper shaker and Be Our Guest center stage. Someone who used to hide is now like right up there on center stage. And I was so proud of what she had done. I asked her, so I did an eczema family healing circle, and the theme was the power of creating your own story. And I had her lead the exercise because it's one thing coming from me. It's a completely other thing coming from a peer who's experiencing what these other kids were experiencing right now. And she basically, decided to change her state of being to one in which she is happy, she's healthy, she's joyful, and it changed her life. And you don't have to be adult to do that. You can do that. And it starts with hope. Because now when I tell that story to other people and other people hear it, then they now see that it's a potential possibility for them. So don't give up hope. Know that you're not alone, that there are lots of people out there, those resources, whether it's at camp or family support groups or whatever it is, because I don't know who to attribute this to because I heard it from someone else who didn't know where it came from. But when I becomes we, illness becomes wellness. That is the power of community. So find your tribe, find that community, know that you're not alone. And then also one of the things that I tell patients and their families is that, the pain and suffering that you're experiencing right now is going to become a superpower. And at first they look at me like I'm crazy. But I was like, no, hear me out. What you're experiencing right now is going to make you stronger. It's going to make you kinder. It's going to make you more compassionate towards the pain and suffering of others. And the world could use a lot more love like that. And when they get to that point where they understand and recognize and stand in their own power, one, they get better, physically get better, but they're in a place that they can take on the world. They can do and be whatever they want to be. And when they reach that point of feeling limitless, they've healed. So does my patient have eczema still? Of course she does. She has, flares here and there. So she's not cured, but I challenge anyone to tell me that she's not healed.
That is amazing. First of all, I think you're the coolest dermatologist ever because I can only imagine going to a doctor's office and the doctor is like, we're going to meditate together. And I think that is so amazing. But I love that doctors nowadays, I know sometimes we get criticized like, oh, we just want to prescribe and treat the actual disease. But I love that you're bringing medicine kind of back to what it used to be, is actually heal ourselves, heal our mind, all those things, those thoughts that we have. It is so powerful. It's not just, voodoo, woohoo, snake oil. It's so powerful. And in medicine, at least in traditional Western medicine, I don't think we focus enough on that.
One of the other perks of being in a direct care practice is that I never have to look at a clock. I can spend all the time that I want to talk to them about nutrition, talk to them about stress reduction, talk to them about what brings you joy. That's my favorite question to ask my patients. And they're always caught off guard a little bit because what doctor has ever asked them that? But I asked that for a reason because when I asked that question, I have met the most talented artists and musicians and chefs. I had a 12-year-old talk to me about sous vide cooking. I had a 9-year-old tell me that she loves to rap. And when I do that, their heart lights up and because they get to share something from of who they are, not just what's on the surface of their skin. And if they learn to project that out into the world, it's funny, a lot of the kids who have come to camp for a really long time, at some point, many of them get better. And they always ask me, can I still come back to camp if I don't have eczema anymore? Because again, it doesn't define them anymore. Yes, they're someone who has eczema. It's made them, it helped them become the person that they are. It's not who they are.
And I love how you said that this will become their superpower, right? It's through the challenges that we find our superpowers. And you wouldn't be able to have a superpower if you didn't have to kind of go through struggles and find yourself.
All the superheroes have origin stories, right? Like,
That's right. So, yeah, we have to kind of reframe it. And a lot of the things we see in dermatology, we can't cure. So, it's important to let people know, like you said, we can still heal. So, I think that's beautiful. And you're an amazing person. I can't believe all the cool stuff you're doing. I love it. This has been a lot of fun. Where can people find you or follow you if they want to come see you? What are the best resources?
probably the cool things that I'm talking about, a lot of it is on www.thejoyfulpath.org. You can learn about the programs that I'm doing, the children's books that I'm doing. I also bloombergdermatology.com if you want to know a little bit more about my dermatology philosophy. But I'm kind of doing, I actually at this point it's kind of 50-50. So I'm doing a lot of both of those things because, like I said, in many ways I feel kind of limited in all the ways that I can help people all over the world in a clinic setting. But now I'm able to do a lot of things and to heal a lot more kids all over the world in these ways.
That's what's so cool. I think we're redefining medicine in the last, 10 years. And I think in the future too, we actually can help heal and treat patients beyond just our clinic walls. So you're a great example of how we can do that. So this has been amazing. I love it. Thanks so much for your time today. And I will see everyone next week.